On the recruiting trail, June is a big month for Oregon, but what does good actually mean?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. How many blowout games are on the schedule? That's a risky conversation that I'm going to have. Who needs to return in 2026 to make a run for a national title? And I'm so excited for the defensive backroom. Busy show today, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, June is a month that could be really fun. It could be really, really good. Oregon might even get some more commits. Of course, they landed a couple guys in the class of 2027, but that's not what everybody's really waiting for, right? That was just the appetizer. And frankly, from a recruiting summer standpoint, I think a couple of really good-looking guys in the class of 2027 on the defensive line, that's like the course before, that's the bread before the appetizer, you know? When you're enjoying it, it's the best part of the meal, but then later you realize, wow, that was great, and it wasn't even the best thing that I had today. I think that's where Oregon recruiting's setting up to be. But success is, I'm an aim low and achieve sort of guy in some ways. Not in others, but in some ways. Oregon should land at least 3 recruits this month. At least. I'm saying that 3 to the dome. Carmelo Anthony with the Blazers. I hope somebody good buys the Blazers, by the way. But 3 commits in the month of June is the bare minimum. If it's 1 or 2, we should all be scratching our heads. And you need not look very far back to see that June should be a good month for Oregon. Historically has been on the recruiting trail. Last cycle, in June, they added 5 players. One of them, Brandon Finney, is one of the highest rated players in the class of 2025. I don't think he plays as a true freshman because when you recruit as well as Oregon does, it's hard to see the field right away even when you're supremely talented. But the 2 true freshmen who are most likely to do that didn't commit in June. They committed much later on. You had DeCorian Moore committing in July. Naeem Offord was even later in the cycle than that. So patience is always warranted. I still get plenty of messages from people like, man, what's going on with recruit? Where's the recruiting wins? Where's the buzz? USC is doing all this stuff. I'm fully aware. I talk about it on Locked On College Football all the time. USC is having a phenomenal recruiting cycle. There is no other way to slice it. Their floor, I think, is higher than Oregon's ceiling for the class of 2026, bringing kids from the high school ranks. Because their floor is a top 5 class with the volume, the caliber of kids they have gotten, who they could continue to get. Their floor is a top 5 class. With the misses Oregon has had, particularly Jared Curtis and Jackson Cantwell, not being able to land either one of those guys probably takes you out of the top 5 conversation. And Oregon's volume of recruits right now is currently sitting at 7. Last cycle was 19 total. Really, it was 18, though. And if you want to get super technical, last cycle was a top 10 class, more than a top 5 class. Jaron Kiave Sangopolatele, for those who don't recall, committed to Oregon. And I am not the only person in the Oregon coverage space that knows that was never supposed to happen. He's at Cal. I think he went to 1 or 2 Oregon practices and then went to Cal, which is always where he was supposed to wind up. Still, you take him out of the fold, Oregon still pulls in its 3rd straight top 10 class last cycle. But it was, from a volume standpoint, smaller than the first 2 classes that Dan Lanning and his staff brought in. It was the first one that was under 20 players. I think the start would make you think that they won't get to that 20 threshold again this cycle. They're not going to be under 16. That would be that would be a tiny class, and with Oregon already at 7 and a couple of guys that have shut down their recruitment in Tredarian Ball and Kendre Harrison, running back and a tight end respectively. I think they're going to be at double digits at a minimum. At a minimum, that is baseline expectation, just like making the playoff every year for Oregon football is an expectation. Baseline for the month of June, Oregon should add 3 players. I won't be shocked if it's in the 5 or 6 range. The visitor lineup is really good. The number of guys who they have been trending very well for in the last several weeks continues to be good. There was a notable decision elsewhere on the trail. Tommy Toffee, who projects maybe as a two-way player, but is probably an interior offensive lineman, 6'6", over 300 pounds, big dude. Maybe he could play tackle. I don't know. Really intriguing prospect from the Northern California area. Went to Archbishop Riordan, which, fun fact that some of you care about, some of you don't. I broadcasted Archbishop Riordan games when I was in college, so it's cool to see kids come out of that program that I recall from my college days. But he ended up choosing Cal. Now, the other schools in the running were Tennessee, BYU, Utah, and Oregon. Top 140 player in the country, top 10, 15 at his position, winds up going to Cal. You know what? Sometimes recruiting is wild like that. And when, for the last several weeks, if you followed the crystal balls and whatnot online, looked like Oregon was in a good spot. He's going to Cal. You know what? Props to Cal. Because clearly they're playing the NIL game the way that you are supposed to if you want to recruit a high level. Cal, with head coach Justin Wilcox, is actually out recruiting Oregon at the moment. I'm not anticipating that is going to last. But if Toffee had gone elsewhere and you asked me that a week ago, where would he go? I would not have selected the Bears, even though he's a Northern California kid. However, there's still, I know it's another one that some of you out there were like, man, why did he go elsewhere? Why didn't Oregon get him? I get it. I totally get it. First of all, I expect Richard Wesley at some point after he takes all of his visits to wind up back with Oregon. That's just my personal opinion and expectation there. He's a 5-star edge that will bolster Oregon's recruiting ranking about 10 spots just with one particular player. It gets harder to go up that many places as you get higher and higher because you have a bunch of highly rated commits, of course, elsewhere for the other schools in the country. But I think in the month of June, Oregon will land a couple of prospects, and everyone will be able to realize, oh, okay, they're going to be okay. They're not going to pull a top 5 class. Turns out that's a difficult thing to do every year. Turns out Oregon doesn't just have unlimited NIL and then go get anybody they want. Who could have possibly foreseen? Me. I foresaw, and many of you did as well. So 3 is a baseline expectation. If they go over 5, then they're outperforming their pace in the month of June from last year's cycle. But I think in the 3 to 5 range, pretty reasonable expectation for what we should see this month. Also, this is a question I got, and I'll ask Brian at some point this week on the show. I'm not entirely sure the answer, but if you look at On3's recruiting rankings, I'm a 24/7 guy. Personally, I just always have been. I like their composite ranking because it's an all-encompassing metric for player evaluations. 24/7's got Oregon's class at number 27 nationally. On3 has it like hovering around the top 10. It's not as if there's a lack of talent in this class. There isn't. There's a lack of volume, and I expect that to change. But Oregon's average player rating still pretty darn high, headlined by 5-star tight end Kendra Harrison. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. A couple of interesting questions that you guys sent in. How many games does Oregon run away with this year? I probably would have been close if I'd been asked that last year. I would not have been right, and it's hard this year. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, they're in full swing. The NBA Finals are around the corner, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel is making it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you like college football, which you probably do if you listen to or watch this show, you know how much stuff they've got over there? They've got win totals. They have got national title odds, conference championship odds. You can even bet upon individual game matchups. I mean, holy smokes. Is that fantastic? And you can turn $5 and $200 in bonus bets. Why? Because if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Where are you going to find a better deal than that? I don't know. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Always got to have those second segment sips and mailbag questions. YouTube comments, Twitter, you send them in. You can send in takes for Spencer's scale of agreement. Hot takes, cold takes, Goldilocks, just right takes. Hey, they're all welcome. All welcome in there. You can become a Locked On Ducks insider as well. Link in the description below for a free 14-day trial. You get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks too. Anthony sends this one in. Hey, Spencer, how many games do you think Oregon will be able to pull its starters? I know in years past we used to have blowouts and get a lot of backups in. Last year, I only think we had one or two at the most. I'm thinking with the team we have, the depth, and the schedule, we'll get more opportunities. I'm thinking around 5 to 6 this year. What do you think? 5 to 6? Where are the 5 to 6 blowouts on the schedule? Spencer's scale of agreement there. I don't know if you meant to send it in for that, but I'm going to apply it anyway. 2? I'm gonna go with a 2. So Oregon opens with Montana State. I saw they added former Stanford quarterback Justin Lamson. I'm sure there's I'm so certain that there's no negative voodoo there for Oregon in week 1. But Montana State, that's a possibility. Northwestern is on the road. It could get weird. It's not a great football team. Northwestern's not a program that can keep up nationally right now. At least they haven't showcased they're able to. They kind of flash up every couple of years and they're okay. Like 2 years ago they were good, but then last year they kind of stunk. That's a big noon kickoff. Maybe that gets weird. You've got the Civil War on September 20th. Oregon's got a much better team, but Oregon State's going to be much better than they were last year. And the backups got in for, I think, like one drive last year against the Beavs, and that was on the road, so technically possible. Penn State, definitely not. Indiana at home off a bye. No, you're not going to have the back. Rutgers in Piscataway, technically possible. But again, in Piscataway, long trip. Wisconsin at home, no. Iowa on the road, absolutely not. Minnesota at home, sleeper game right there. USC by the way, that Minnesota game's on a Friday night. Or, I mean, possible, but Minnesota's a good program. That might be the most underrated game on Oregon's schedule. USC at Autzen, no. You should win the game, but no. Washington on the road, improved Husky team on the road, no. I would like to, but again, I'm just talking blowouts here. Like, yeah. I tell you what. I don't even want to put any bad mojo in the air out there on the airwaves with the power of the microphone that sits in front of me here and even say anything about the Montana State game. I mean, last year, Jared Mack and I infamously both predicted Oregon to beat Idaho 66-10. And after a 24-14 sweaty game at Autzen Stadium, Oregon started 1-0, of course, en route to a 13-0 season. But yeah, I don't know. Like, let me know, Anthony. I'm curious where your head's at with the 5 to 6. Like, it's not going to be 0. Even though Oregon is replacing a lot, they're still more talented than just about every team on here. And, you know, particularly, like, I'd like to say towards the end of the season, once they all, you know, get acclimated and get comfortable with one another, they could really get somebody like a Minnesota or maybe a USC, but those are not bad teams. They're not great teams, but they're definitely not bad teams. So, and at Iowa, Iowa's defense is going to be way too good, as they are every year, to go in there and, you know, really blow them out. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Oklahoma State game, I don't have a super strong vibe on Oklahoma State yet. Haven't done my offseason homework on the Cowboys just yet. So definitely not 5 or 6. I'd say like 3. I think 3 is a comfortable number where, you know, you'll see Austin Novosad get a couple drives in the game. Like that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, give me 3. I'll go with 3. 5, 6, way too high. I'd pick 2 before I picked 5 or 6. Brian sends this one in. I've been thinking about this a lot since the spring game, and you've talked a little bit about it on some recent episodes, but wanted your opinion on this. Who are the most important pieces we need back to come back to contend for a natty in 2026? The words are right in front of me on my notes, and I couldn't read them. Why? I don't really know. To answer your question, Brian, can we start with Dante Moore? The number of quarterbacks that are in their second or third season with a team that have won a national championship recently, pretty extensive list. Will Howard with Ohio State this past year, the exception. It was his, I think, 5th, maybe 4th year of college football. Let me look that up real quick. He had been around the block. It was his 5th season of college football last year. So, pretty experienced guy. So let's start with Dante Moore. If he were to be one and done and go to the NFL, it'd probably be Austin Novosad's time to shine. Would that lessen my expectation? With a hold, I mean, he'd be like Ty Simpson at Alabama at this point, who's going into his 4th year and probably is going to start for the first time. I think it would literally be the same situation. So I'm not saying they couldn't do it with Novosad if he were to stick around for 26, but let's start with Dante Moore as the most important piece. Bring back your quarterback, keep him in the same system. He's definitely high on the list. I assume you mean this in the context of keeping guys out of the NFL draft. So I'm going to put Poncho in there as well, because if he has a great season starting at center for the Ducks for a second straight year, he could go to the draft. At the top of this list, but right below Dante Moore, is Mateo Uiagalelei. And look, it will forever and always be my dream that NIL would be enough to bring Mateo back. And I'm sure Oregon will have that conversation. It's just that I'm sure they had that conversation in some form or fashion with Derek Harmon and Josh Connerly. Well, you're going to go be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. It's pretty hard to get a guy to stay. Them's the breaks. I'm sure Ohio State will talk to Jeremiah Smith before he departs for the NFL and say, hey, you should come back for a 4th year. We'll give you $4 million and we'll win a national title. And he'll probably say, that's great, but the Jags are going to take me 2nd overall. So dude, that's a tough selling point. But yeah, quarterback, edge rusher, I don't know which guys in the secondary we'll be thinking about in this conversation. We have to watch this season play out. But Dylan Thieneman could come back. He's played 2 years at Purdue. This first season with Oregon will be his 3rd season of college football overall. So veteran guys like that who are proven pieces, I think matter a ton. I'll throw one more at you, Devin Jackson. Devin Jackson would be the most experienced Oregon Duck defender if he comes back in 2026. That's incredibly valuable to a defense, especially because he'd probably be the defensive signal caller with the headset piece in the helmet, getting the play calls in from Tosh Lupoy and getting everybody organized. I think that'll be Bryce Betcher this year. It was Jeff Bossa last year, and I think it would be Devin Jackson next year if he comes back for a 5th and final season of college football. So yeah, did I list enough of those important pieces? Kenny Sadiq could be up there. It's just that as much of a stud as he is, and as much as I love him, which I do because I've watched him play football before, tight end is not a premier position, and I think Oregon's recruiting that spot very well. I mean, Kendra Harrison could be an impact guy as a true freshman, and you've got plenty of other guys in the like. They probably wouldn't be as good as Sadiq right away, but if you have a drop off at tight end from one year to the next, that's kind of first world problems. But quarterback, defensive back, edge rusher, yeah, those are your premier spots. So good question. If you have other questions about what might happen in 26, you send them right in, or anything else related to Oregon. You send me the questions, I answer them here on the show. Speaking of the defensive backfield, it's going to be so much fun. the news just rolls in time and time and time and time again. And sometimes my position group evaluations slip to the back burner and they are now on the front burner because I am stoked to watch the secondary this year. Not because I think they are going to be just as good. I mean, by the end of the season, maybe they'll be better than last year. The amount of talent in the room is crazy. I'm going to be excited watching the secondary this year because I think in 2026, I was talking about returners in the previous segment, if you bring back a strong core of guys who get real meaningful experience this fall, you're going to look at a 2026 Oregon secondary that will be the best that Dan Lanning has ever had and maybe one of the best in the history of Oregon football, which is why I'm excited to watch. There's no guarantees because it's got to play out on the field. You got to take the first step, got to walk before you can crawl. Reverse that, of course. If you get that reference, please let me know so we can be best friends forever and always. Mitchell, that's my brother. You don't need to. I know you know the reference. Anyway, so this is a room that is just stacked with blue chip talent everywhere that you look, and the depth is crazy. We don't know a lot, which is why I'm excited. Like it's the mystery box from Family Guy. Mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. So it could be a boat. It could be 2 tickets to the opera, but it could be a boat. And so I think the number of guys who have, different kind of sizes, skill sets, ability, versatility, I think you've just got so much to work with here. So the room has got Dalen Austin, Kingston Lopa. This is in no particular order. Sione Laulea, who is maybe the most slept on guy in the secondary going into this year. Brandon Finney, Theron Johnson, Jaleel Florence, Ife Obadegwu, Trey McNutt, Dakota Fields, Peyton Woodyard, Naeem Offord, Solomon Davis, Dorian Brew, Aaron Flowers, Jadon Kennedy, Dylan Thieneman. So, my best crack at who starts this fall attempt, I don't really know where the crack. Anyway, my best attempt at who starts in this secondary goes like this. You got 5 guys, of course. Oregon runs a base 4-2-5. We all know that by now. At least I hope. I hope we all know that and have seen that over the last several years. Dylan Thieneman is a surefire starter at safety. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. At the other safety, I'm going with Kingston Lopa. 6'3", 6'4". Man, you go look at what he has put on film this year. He looks fast. He just looks really fast. He looks a lot like Brian Addison. I don't know exactly what went on with Brian Addison, why he transferred to UCLA. Of course he did, and then picked off Dylan Gabriel, took it to the house. I always thought Brian Addison was good on the back end of Oregon's defense. He flew around. He made hits. He got interceptions. He was rangy. He could make plays at all 3 levels. Lopa can be that kind of guy. And, I thought he did a couple of nice things back in the spring game. And, this is a room that entering spring ball, I had a grade of a C, which is average, just because I don't know a whole heck of a lot. I see the potential. I did feel better about it and upgrade him to a C+ coming out of spring. Remember, I'm a tough grader. Tough grader here on the show. Nothing comes easily. Nothing. The amount of talent in the room is immense. The amount of proven production, incredibly limited. But I think Lopa starts at the other safety position alongside Dylan Thieneman. I hope they don't, because, the word on Jadon Kennedy, the transfer from Ole Miss, is he's okay. But he's not bad, but he's not great. He's just kind of there. I would love to see a young guy in that spot more than Kennedy, who's a veteran and might get the start at first, and maybe they work a younger guy into the fold. That's kind of my guess, but I hope he's brought in as a depth piece. I think it'll be him or Theron Johnson starting at a nickel spot. Johnson's played more outside corner, but I think has the body type like Brandon Johnson, who came in last year, to play some nickel for the Ducks. But I think your 2 starting outside corners are going to be Ife Obadegwu and Jaleel Florence. The spring buzz on Ife Obadegwu was very real. Others had talked about it that cover the Ducks. I had heard things that the coaching staff really likes him, and so I went into the spring game, and I was watching to see, is he going to make an impact play? Is he going to take guys away? Is he going to get beat? What's he going to look like? First of all, physically, across the board, all of these guys look like they belong. There's no one that looks outmatched, undersized. I will say, of everybody, I thought Peyton Woodyard had the worst spring game of everybody and just looked slow and out of position a couple of times. He might have just had a bad day. But I was getting too many flashbacks to the safeties of the last couple of years that Oregon's had. And that I think Oregon's corners for the last several years have actually been good. The safety play hasn't been up to standard, which is why you've got Thieneman and somebody else. Aaron Flowers, I think, could see the field. I think Lopa is a more intriguing physical prospect. They were both blue chip guys coming out of high school. Flowers was more decorated from, an Under Armour All-American standpoint, but I think Lopa is just such a unique body type. I think he can bring more to the table being rangy on the back end of the defense, but when Ife Obadegwu forced that fumble that who scooped and scored? It was Blake Purchase. When Blake Purchase, one of the standouts of the spring game, scooped and scored the fumble, and you realize it was Ife that made the play. And then you realize as the game, went on that they just weren't throwing the ball Ife's way at all. I think it was pretty telling. So I think he starts, and I'm putting Jalil Florence at the other outside corner spot. Last time Jalil Florence was fully healthy in 2023, towards the end of the season, he was starting for a reason. He has played since he was a true freshman in 2022. That was one of those early Dan Lanning, Lincoln Riley, USC recruiting battles, and Florence has been a good player for the Ducks for the last several years. Now, there are a lot of different combinations that I think you could reasonably predict for a starting five, but Thieneman, Obadegwu, Florence, Lopa, and Kennedy, I think it's as good of an attempt as any, quite frankly. But the guy I mentioned earlier, Sione Laulea, I do not want him to go overlooked. And one thing that excites me about this room is that they're not proven. True. But I don't know that there's a big drop off from first unit to second unit guys. Whereas in years past, that hasn't always been the case. And it's not always the case at any position group. But with this collection of DBs, even with Roderick Pleasant, down at UCLA, because, of course, that's where all the former Oregon blue chip DBs that hit the portal go. Roderick Pleasant, Jalen Davies, Brian Addison, all went down there. And there have been plenty of other players too. But I just think that the depth in this room is really, really exciting. If Naeem Offord sees the field this year, I think Oregon fans might just go insane in the best way possible, because he's the highest rated defensive back recruit in the history of Oregon football. And does he have a direct path to playing time? No. Is he good enough to get on there? Yes. It would not shock me. He's not going to play safety, according to Tosh Lupoy. He could play nickel, though. Wouldn't shock me if he sees the field as a nickel back at some point this year. And what I just liked most, I've still got my spring game notes on here. What I liked most about this group, despite the inexperience, which is the only reason that their grade is not higher, is that they just don't have a ton of experience right now, which means guys will make mistakes and will still have areas, despite their potential, where they need to improve. They were making plays. They were in good coverage spots, but there were a lot of plays made against a couple of quarterbacks who we know can really sling the rock. So I'm really excited to watch this group. I was talking about them yesterday on the show, so I thought I'd dive into them today, of course. If you got any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, statements of outrage, you know what to do. Drop the comments below. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.